So I think we'll get started. Welcome in. My name is Lisa Fain. I'm CEO of Center for Mentoring Excellence. We are here today for the continuation of our Thought Leader conversation series. And I don't have my background on today because I wanted to be able to show you one of my most referred books. You can see all the dog ears already, which is Feedback and Other Dirty Words by our thought leaders today, Tamra Chandler and Laura Grealish. And I'll introduce them in a moment. So Tamra Chandler is a globally recognized thought leader, author, and speaker who's known for developing new and effective ways for people and their organizations to perform at their peak. I should say she has newly been named one of the top 100 HR influencers, along with Adam Grant, Marcus Buckingham, and other greats, just as Tamra. So we're really excited to have her. In 2016, wrote the book, How Performance Management is Killing Performance and What to Do About It. And I've already showed you her second book, Feedback and Other Dirty Words, Why We Fear It, How to Fix It, which was published in 2019. She has more than 30 years experience in strategically partnering with organizations across industries on varied and complex business transformation projects. To her role as EY America's People Advisory Services Leader, she has a down-to-earth style, a results-driven approach, really emphasizing the human element of organizations while maintaining an unwavering focus on the larger picture. And so really, really thrilled to have you here today, Tamra. Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. So excited to be here. Thank you.
And I also want to introduce Laura Grealish, who brings 20 years of experience in helping her clients create thriving environments and engage people. Her passion for human-centric solutions is clear, whether she's coaching leaders, modernizing approaches to talent management, or partnering to optimize individual skills, capabilities, confidence, and well-being. She's the co-author of that amazing book, Feedback and Other Dirty Words. And in addition to being a global speaker on the topic of feedback, she leads the design and delivery of EY's customized feedback workshops for employees and managers. Prior to joining EY, she led teams and projects at GE Capital, Genworth Financial, Cleveland Clinic, and Russell Investment, and others. Laura, welcome.
Wow, thanks. I hate those bios. It makes us sound so stuffy. We're just a couple of chicks who wrote a book, and we're happy to be here with you, Lisa, because you wrote a fabulous book, and all y'all friends, you hang out together once a month. Is that what you do?
We do once a month. We have these thought leader conversations. And so we have some people who have, this is their first, some people who have joined multiple, and we're thrilled to have you no matter how many there is.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, I'm particularly excited because as somebody who spends her time thinking, talking, writing about mentoring, feedback is such a critical part of the mentoring experience. And so I thought that we could dig deep today into that. And, you know, the M that I care the most about is mentoring, but I know that you talk a lot about the 3 M's. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what are the 3 M's and what does it have to do with creating a healthy culture of feedback?
Laura, you want me to kick us off?
Go. Why? Yeah. Why did we write this book?
Yeah. So, well, that's a different question than the 3 M's. But to Lisa's point, we wrote this book because, as Lisa said, we realized that so much of our ability to help people perform, to help them reach their potential, to help teams achieve the stretch goals that they have, all these things comes down to, in essence, this idea of being able to help each other move forward into the future. And unfortunately, feedback has gotten labeled as more this look back and punish you for whatever you did in the past, rather than think about how we coach and lift you up for the future. And so as Laura and I do a lot of work in the performance management space, and we really, it became clear to us, and then we found research that even validated this, that the one thing that is the most important in helping people move forward is having feedback that is helpful, not hurtful. Mm-hmm. And so as we've been doing this work, we introduced, you won't find the 3 M's in the book, but we introduced this idea of the 3 M's as we were working with clients as mindset, methods, and muscle. And what we realized is to really shift your culture of feedback, to move you into a different space where feedback is experienced differently, where it becomes something that's helpful and not hurtful, we need to first start with our mindset and shift the way we think about feedback, shift our definition of feedback, shift the way we think about the roles of feedback. So we talk a lot about the 3 roles in feedback, which we can talk about more later, Lisa. So we always say mindset is the hardest thing to shift, because so much of us grew up with a mindset that says, if I tell you what you're doing wrong, that's the best way I can help you, which is absolutely incorrect. So we have to shift our mindset in the way we think about feedback and engage in feedback and the roles that we play in feedback. Then in methods, in order to shift an organizational culture, you need to start to have common methods and tools that you can use. And so we spend time thinking about, well, how does feedback show up in mentoring? How does feedback show up in performance management? How does it show up in our company meeting? Like where does feedback show up, and what are the methods that we use to create this experience we want for our people? And then muscle is just building the capability and confidence of people to engage in it in that way. So if you've defined those methods, you've shifted mindset, how do you get people so they're able to operate in a new environment of feedback? So those are our 3 M's that go along with your 4th M of mentoring.
Yeah. I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Laura.
No, I just said I love that. I love the 4th M.
Yeah. Speaking of the 4th M, there are a number of folks on this call who administer, run, form, design, mentoring programs. And so I love how you've thought about a mentoring culture in organizations. Any guidance for those of us who do that work as to think about, if we're designing a mentoring initiative, how do we think about incorporating a culture of feedback within the initiative itself?
It's interesting, and Laura may have a different view on this than I do. Or an additional view. I would think that, I talked about the 3 roles in our ideas of methods and mindset. And we talk about the seeker, the receiver, and the extender. And we say that the seeker has the most power. That's where the power is in our movement to fix feedback. And so when you think about mentoring, Lisa, rather than start with the mentors, I would start with the mentees on how to be an excellent feedback seeker. And even people who think they're good at seeking feedback, when you start to kind of push on it a little bit, you find that maybe they're not so good, because maybe they're not making a specific ask, or maybe they're asking what they think they should ask, not what they're really interested in. Or there's different things that we do when we're seeking feedback that undermines the value we're going to get from it. So as I was putting forward a mentoring program, I'd want to talk to both the mentors and the mentees, but I would really start with, how do you become a superb seeker as a mentee? Laura, what would you say?
Absolutely. That's exactly where I was going to go, is that the mentors, right? Those of us that are supposed to be, kind of wiser and know it all, be it all, they can only be as effective as the mentee, allows them to, right? So having that seeker strength, that mindset, that feedback is something great for me, and that's something that can really help change and shape my career and my life. It also helps the mentor be more honest, right? It creates that zone of psychological safety, because I know what you're looking for, and I'm going to be able to freely help you find that.
Yeah, for sure. There's an art to seeking feedback, I think, too. So often, and you've probably both experienced this, somebody says, hey, do you have any feedback for me? And you're kind of like, doing a great job. I mean,
Right.
I remember when I was learning how to speak, I'm still learning, I'm always learning how to speak. But when I was starting my speaking journey, I was in a speaking program, and they put us in feedback groups, and they said, don't just sit back and ask. Don't just sit back and say, give me feedback. There was a degree of specificity.
Yeah,
how
right.
am I doing on my blocking? How am I doing on my projecting?
Right.
How would you guide mentees into how to seek, specific feedback from their mentors? Is there, a path, a model, something they could be thinking about?
The 3 S's for seekers,
Yeah.
Tamra. We've got 3 S's too.
We have 3 S's. Yeah, we say specific, selective, and situational. So, to your point, Lisa, a specific ask. So a lot of the work that Laura and I do, and Laura's more she's really the expert in this idea of fear and trust and how we bring down the fear and elevate the trust, because that's where we can create a really strong feedback experience. Is if I trust you and I've lowered my fear and my anxiety about that. And so to bring down that fear and elevate the trust, the more specific we are, the more we operate in that zone. Because like you said, if I say, hey, tell me how I'm doing, hey, give me some feedback, how am I doing? You totally send the extender into fear mode because they don't know what you're looking for. And, sometimes when we say that, we just need somebody to say, honey, you're lovely and you're doing a great job. And that's all we're looking for. And you might have someone come back and say, oh, well, I have some feedback for, which wasn't what you were looking for. And sometimes there's something specific. So we always say you have to really narrow that to be specific. What am I looking for? So Lisa, when you're talking about your presentation, I'm really looking at my eye contact, and can you please give me some specific feedback on eye contact and how you experience that? Then they know what you're looking for. Their fear is down. You're getting what you need because you've made a specific ask. What's interesting to me is I find as you go up, like, I don't know how many of your folks here might be mentoring higher level, leaders and executive level people are in mentoring programs. But what's interesting I found is when you get to those higher levels, oftentimes leaders don't even know what they like, oh, I'm good, I don't need anything, right? And it actually takes some work to make them think about, well, what would you ask? Like, what could actually help you be a better leader, be a better human, whatever it is you're seeking to achieve. So it takes some work to think about what is it that would help me and how do I make a specific ask in that? And then you want to think about being selective. We're talking about mentors and mentees. So clearly you're having a conversation with your mentor, but we would say, hey, you should build what Laura calls your board of others. Like, well, you've got your mentor, but who's your board of others that you would go seek that feedback from, that you could come back to your mentor and say, hey, here's the 5 things I heard. Can you help me process that? Mm-hmm. So that gives you a lot more impact in seeking, because what we know is that the more sources you have, the much higher the utility is of feedback. And in fact, Gartner has some great research that says if you get to about 7 or 8 sources, your utility of that feedback goes way up. So if we can get mentees to say, hey, I'm going to go not only make the specific ask from my mentor, but from multiple others, and then come back and work it with my mentor, then you're really in a zone, for power. And then the third S, situational. Laura, you want to talk about that one? I'll be quiet for a bit.
Well, yeah. And I think situational, asking for feedback, we always say ask in advance, right? If the situation isn't right, don't hit me with it out of the blue. Don't hit me with it in the corner. Don't hit me with it, in the hallway if it isn't right. I think the situation for the seeker is also really important, again, to give the mentor. Tamra was talking about the fear and the trust. There's often fear in getting feedback, but there's also fear that we as mentors feel in giving it. Can I really be straight with this person? Can they take it? I fear, I don't want to ruin the relationship. So making sure that the situation is right is important. And ponder your booze, like your board of others. It's not all the mentor. I think one of the worst mentor relationships I ever had was where it was this young person who said, I just want to be like you and do like you and teach me how to be that. And it's like, that is not something you can do. It's like, what do you want to learn? What do you want to grow? How can we help develop your style or your presentation style to be unique to you?
Yeah, that's so key. I want to talk a little bit more about fear and trust. But before I do, I just want to add my 2 cents on this idea of board of others. I love that term, and I love that you call it booze. That's awesome.
My boo.
That's all.
A lot of times, particularly when we're talking about organizational mentoring programs within an organization, there's either fear or pushback from the supervisor or the manager who's not the assigned mentor. Like, what does this mean for me, right? And what I often tell mentees is a way to alleviate, but also leverage both relationships, is whatever the goals you set with your mentor are, you can seek feedback on your development from your supervisor. And then, as you say, work on it with your mentor. So I just wanted to take it a little bit more to the mentoring context, because I think that's really.
And I would say one more layer you could put on that, Lisa, is that we're trying to really work with teams now to create more feedback situations where teams, as you build the trust, are even willing to say, hey, this is the thing I'm working on, right? And across the team, you can help coach and support each other, or help give each other experiences that support building a skill or something that you're looking for. So, as we can elevate the trust and lower the fear, we can start to create this whole ecosystem, not just the supervisor and the mentor, but my peers and my others who are all part of that boo and help me move forward, right? And the more we're able to just be ourselves and be open to that, it starts to create some really powerful experiences for folks.
That's really, really key. Laura, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more about this fear and trust relationship, and how might a mentor or a mentee really establish and build trust? Any tips, thoughts on that?
Yeah. My contribution to the book and to this work that we're doing really allowed me to dig deep into some of the research, right? Some of the neuroscience and all the amazing work that's been done out there recently about why do we fear, feedback, conversations? Why do we fear, relationships in some? And, it comes down to, like Tamra said, lots of times it's our past. We call it my feedback past. It's our biology, right? Science tells us that many times feedback, if it's critical, or if it's delivered in a fashion that isn't, that you're not ready for, can be to the human body just like a physical blow. Your body will react, that old fight or flight kind of thing, to words, and impact it as deeply as if you were struck physically. And so we, did a lot of research trying to how do I get behind that? How do I get around it? How do I understand it? And there's kind of two ways to go. And this is mentors and mentees, right? Feedback giver or feedback getter. You can either we really need to get on top of our own feedback stories, our own feeling. Ask each one of you right now, think about a time when someone said, hey, I got some feedback for you. Feel that feeling right now for me. And just put in the chat or come off of mute. Tell me one or two words that's coming up for you right now. Hey, Lisa, I got some feedback for you. What's going through your mind? What's the word that would come through? Anybody? Say.
For me, it's fear. What do others say?
Okay.
I'm questioning regarding what?
Regarding what? Keep it coming. What else? What just came up for you? Be honest.
I'm wondering what I goofed up.
What did I do up, right? What did I do wrong?
Put it in the chat. Oh no.
Right? What did I do wrong? Oh no. Yeah, sometimes we get like, not again. Is it going to be as bad as the most horrible feedback I ever received, Geraldine? Thank you. That's right. So that's where we start. It's like noticing. We talk a lot in the book about noticing, but I ask my feedback self, what am I noticing about myself? That's my feedback past. That's my feedback history. Now, then you start to get your mind wrapped around that and start to kind of manage those emotions. There's things we can do, right? We can either lean into them and get excited and think, okay, I'm going to switch my mindset, like Tamra said, and go, wow, well, the last time I got some feedback from this person, it was pretty good. It was a good thing. And so I'm going to really lean into it. Or we can do things to manage our emotions, things like breath work, things like mini mindfulness, things like thought stopping. We really do have to kind of manage the emotion around feedback before you can ever harness it to be good. If you're always dreading it, if that's your go-to, You've got to be able to manage it emotionally, and lots of tips in the book to get there. But I want to say, it's a thing for both the giver and the getter. Honestly, I mean, just last week, I had to give some feedback to a young gentleman that works for us, and I fretted about it. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't want to ruin the relationship. I knew he'd been kind of down and out. And so I really had to deal with my own emotions. Why are you feeling this way? How can you get on top of that? And one of the things we ask people to do, mentors and mentees, is always when you're first contracting, try to understand each other's feedback style. There's one question we like to ask each other. It's like, I hate surprises. If we're going to be working together, tell me one thing about you that I need to know, or tell me how you process feedback and what I need to know. So Tamra, when we were doing the book, I had to figure out myself. My thing is this. You know what? I will always catastrophize. I don't care. That word is like, hopefully it's control. I will oh my God, I just went down the path of, and so I have this shirt that I wear at most of ours. I dressed up today, but can you see the shirt?
That's great. Yes.
That's my feedback self. So when I go into a mentor or mentoring relationship, I just say, you know what? How do you like to give or get feedback? What's your go-to? And if people can be honest and say, I'll take it, but believe me, first, I'm going to overreact. I'll get over myself, but just let me go down the path. Tamra, you have a great, when people ask you, what's about you and feedback?
Oh, I always say to people, what I've learned about myself is I'm really not in a good zone if people try to tell me how specifically to do something I think I already know how to do. And, that's where a lot of times we make a mistake when we're providing feedback for people, is trying to give them an answer and tell them versus entering into a conversation with curiosity. And so I'm always triggered if someone comes and says, this is what you needed to do. I'm like, okay, we're not in a good zone. And so I've had to learn to not react and to step back and let that roll. But, I think, as Laura says, as mentee, mentor, having a conversation about, do you have triggers? What is your feedback style? Those things are really helpful. And then helping that mentee start to be able to have that conversation with others. So back to their manager, like you were saying, Lisa, go back and say, hey, here's the way I like to receive feedback. How about you, right? And start to have this conversation where we start to recognize that we all play seeker, receiver, and extender. And the more that we can share our points of view and create comfort, it's less fear, more trust in that, it's better.
Yeah, and I'll just wind up the fear and trust discussion with the connect conversation model that we're going to share with you at the end of this. Was built with little tips to just do two things: increase this component in your body called oxytocin, right? The love drug, the trust drug, and minimize the fear. And so there's all kinds of things we can do. And the connect model is one of it's just a little tip sheet that shows you how to increase oxytocin in a conversation in both the giver and the getter, and that lowers the trust. And the book I love to also, along with yours, Lisa, is Anything by Paul Zak, who wrote The Trust Factor. And his research is so fascinating for me. He's my neuroscience crush. It's like he's done research where they actually draw your blood in a community or in an organization, and they can measure the amount of this hormone, this love drug, oxytocin, after certain types of interactions, and actually give all kinds of great tips and ways to increase that oxytocin and lower cortisol and lower fear. And it's fascinating. I mean, it works.
Yeah, it's interesting. The other dynamic in a mentoring relationship isn't just the feedback that a mentor gives a mentee, but in really healthy mentoring relationships, it's the feedback that a mentee is able to give a mentor on whether how the relationship is working, what the, revisiting those agreements as contracting agreements as well. And there's an extra element of fear in that as well, right? Because you have a power differential and you have
Totally.
the phenomenon that so many mentees have of, I want to be the mentee that my mentor wants to mentor, right?
Right.
So that's a really interesting dynamic as well. And I'm wondering if you can, if there's anything you could think of that a mentor might be able to do to encourage the mentee, or maybe even help the mentee feel comfortable sharing difficult feedback with them about how the relationship might be going or what they might need.
I think there's a couple things in that. I mean, it's over time you have to build that trust. That's not going to be something that's going to happen immediately, right? And Laura, when she's talking about Zach and some of the research that Paul Zach has done in this space, what's so interesting is how the correlation between that being able to share the good stuff with people, not just to butter them up, but really to help build trust, right? In the sense that I see you and I see what you're bringing to the table and I care about that. And I'm going to help you see it in yourself and make the most of that, right? And the more that the mentor is helping that individual understand their strengths is where, well, I'm not saying not their opportunities, but really helping them understand and celebrating and soaking in those strengths a bit, that starts to elevate the trust. And so I think that I just have to throw that in there because Laura knows it's my thing. Because like, if you look at all the research, if we just quit giving people what we call constructive feedback because we think that's negative, and then if we just help people know how amazing they were, we would still be better off than if we did no feedback at all, right? Like we would be way better off. Now,
That's right.
does that mean we shouldn't help people fix problems or things that are getting their way? I'm not saying that we should, but if we lean into helping people recognize their strengths and celebrate that and really be a strength spotter, that helps us build the trust. Then I think, to Laura's point on the connect model, if you look at that, you're going to see all these catalyzing questions that are questions that the mentor can use. And so I think the way to start to open that conversation is to ask, again, very specific questions of the mentee. And again, ask in advance, say, if you're in a mentoring session, say, next week, I really would love you to tell me what's the thing that I've done that's been most helpful to you and what's something I have done that maybe hasn't been helpful. And just give the mentee time to think about it and prepare for it. And then, coming into the next conversation, that's what we're going to talk about. But it's opening up with those catalyzing, with, being really curious. I really want to know. I'm trying to become a better mentor. This is my intent. This is setting that context and asking a very specific question. That's where I would go with that, Lisa, to really start to help the mentee be focused and be prepared.
I love that. And Tamra, again, we keep talking about feedback as a bad thing, and much of our point of view and much of the work that Tamra is doing around the world is sharing that, feedback, praise, recognition, holding up the mirror to someone's strengths, that is actually found to be the most powerful type of feedback. And when I mean powerful, I don't mean just make you feel better, but it actually improves people's performance. That growth-minded feedback, holding up the mirror to their strengths. And I think as mentors, that's what we can really do well to increase the trust. And then if there is a bump or something that you need to say, hey, you know what, this thing is really getting in your way, the trust is there because they feel, you feel that they do have your back. Like Tamra said, the intent is there.
Yeah, it's so, it's so important to have that environment of trust so that you can have that garden, of where feedback isn't cataclysmic. It's just an ongoing thing that we do, right? And it's not, it's not, let me get a glass of wine first before you give me a punch in the belly. It's, it's like welcome. It's just welcome that that's what we do when we sit down, is we are able to be candid with one another. And I often say to mentors, you got to have a move first mentality, which is that you share first, you share weaknesses first, you invite and seek feedback first too, which I think right?
Love that.
Yeah.
Move first. I love that, Lisa. That's really, really right on, right?
Yep. So when I was a young whippersnapper first managing people, I asked somebody how to give feedback, and they told me a model, which you have so aptly, I'm going to give you the full version for those of you. This is not PG-13, right? You call it the shit sandwich, right? It's where, you say something positive, then you say something negative, then you say something positive again, right? I'm sure many of you were trained in the same thing. Talk to me a little bit about the shit sandwich and why it's problematic and what to do instead.
Oh, Laura.
Going to me. I love that we can say shit on the air here. We have to kind of customize it sometimes, and we call it the poo sandwich. But you know what? Many of us were trained that way, right? Butter them up, then tell them the tough stuff, and then wrap with, make sure the relationship is intact. And what's wrong with that, right? What's wrong with that? It comes back again to the neuroscience, the research we've done. A couple of things going on here. Your body reacts differently and your brain reacts differently to something they consider a blow, the meat inside there, than they do to something positive. And so your brain is being whipsawed and it doesn't exactly know how to process that. The other thing that's wrong with that is it's not really authentic or honest. It makes you not really even believe the nice stuff. So if I were to say, Lisa, gosh, you're such a great team player, but that thing you did yesterday, you've just got to stop doing that because it's blowing up the whole team. And we really love you anyway. What do you believe? You don't even believe the good stuff. So it's a mixed message. And I think, is it Brene Brown who says, unclear is unfair, being unclear. And I think it kind of degrades the receiver too a little bit. It's like, it almost feels like you're backpedaling and I can't take the real message. Let me take the message. And most of the research says we deliver a shit sandwich. It's more about the mentor. It's more about the giver because you're afraid. You're fearing fracturing the relationship. You're fearing that this person might not handle it well. So it's really getting a hold of your own feelings around it. And again, the antidote to the shit sandwich is not only the connect model, but it's keep it to one thing. If you're going to give feedback and it's strength-based and it's praise and it's recognition, give it freely and give it in the moment. Hey, your delivery today was awesome, Lisa. I loved that webinar. This was fantastic. Boom. Do it all the time. Do it often. And if you've got a more constructive or a more, growth-oriented type of, discussion to have, set the context, do it individually, and don't put the wrapper on it. Just be honest. Be honest about it. Use the connect model. You focus on one thing. You share what you noticed. I'll take you through this, that, you give the effect of what happened, but don't butter it up with smush in between, because I've been getting some shit sandwiches lately and I'm like, wow, what'd you just say to me?
Yeah.
We joke they're not so tasty, so well.
Do y'all have success? I mean, does that resonate with any of you? Do you have success with the shit sandwich? Do you notice that you're a giver of them? I mean, I see some heads like, can you got.
One of the things that Laura is sort of leaning into there is we have 3 F's. So we have a lot of letter alliterations in our book, but the 3 F's: focus, frequency, and fairness. And in combination, they create a powerful feedback experience. So the focus is that one thing. And beyond the mixed messaging, we can only process really one thing at a time. So when the constructs we have, like of annual reviews and these things where we, lists of ups and downs and all that stuff, is really not helpful to people. What's much more helpful is small bites of insights that's shared over a course of a relationship that is focused on one thing. And then that's where the frequency comes in, because the frequency starts to create those more sources and more utility, that I get more frequency of feedback. And then the fairness, of course, is just making sure that we try to keep our own biases out of it. So like Laura said, the shit sandwiches is often our own biases coming in. And the noticing that we lean into is about trying to take that out. So trying to take out our assumptions and our perspectives, but really saying, this is just what I witnessed. I don't want to jump to a conclusion about why that happened or what you were thinking or what was behind it. I just want to share what I witnessed, and then we'll have a conversation about it. And so those 3 F's are really important in the way we think about healthy feedback.
Mhm.
I would love it if you could walk us through the Connect model, Michelle, if you would call that up. And while Michelle's doing that, I just want to invite everyone on the webinar to think of some questions. Well, after Tamra and Laura walk us through the Connect model, and we'll share that with you also a little more fully. They have a great tool in the chat that you can download as well. We'd love to hear what it is that you're curious about when it comes to feedback. So why don't I turn it to you, Tamra and Laura, to walk us through this model.
I'll let Laura walk you through the Connect model.
Okay. Connect model. It is in the book. And Lisa, thank you for sending it to your friends. It's a 3-page little PDF, and I hope you'll find it helpful in all your conversations. But it's almost like a little tip sheet. It's a little moniker to remember that feedback is about connecting, less about correcting, right? And there's tips for all 3 roles, whether you're the seeker, the giver, or the receiver. But connect, if you just remember these things, each of these was built to kind of increase that oxytocin, right? Increase trust, and then decrease fear. The first C is about context, setting the context to the conversation, letting people know, gosh, I just want to give you some recognition. It lowers the fear. People know what you want to talk about. When I asked you earlier that question, hey, I've got some feedback for you, there was no context. So a lot of you gave me a fear-based answer, right? If it was, hey, can we connect later on so I can tell you how fabulous that webinar was? That's feedback. And there went your fear just went way, way down. Even if it's like, hey, you know what, that didn't go so well for me today in the meeting. Can we connect at 3 o'clock to talk about it? Okay. My fear just got lowered. I know what I'm going to be prepared. And then there's the O, right? The one thing. Reminder, keep it to one thing. Not a laundry list of the 10 things I hate about you. Not a feedback sandwich, which is a nice, not so nice. And being very explicit and brief. The first N is our ask that there's no grit in your culture or your conversation. And this is not the fabulous Angela Duckworth grit, but we like to talk about making sure that there's no gossip, rumor, innuendo, or triangulation when it's feedback. Especially, thinking about that trust and that mentor-mentee relationship. I don't know about you, but sometimes we get to talking about ourselves and all of a sudden we're talking about somebody else. And the way that Tamra did that. And this is the way Tamra operates, but and it's like our plea is that grit is one of the biggest trust breakers. This kind of grit is one of the biggest trust breakers in your relationship and in your organization. So make sure you're not talking about someone without someone. That the feedback is to the person that it belongs to.
Lisa, I'd be curious from your perspective, because as a mentor, you may not always have direct oversight of the mentee, right? And so we don't want you triangulating, saying so-and-so said this.
Right.
So how do you coach mentors to keep it to no grit?
Yeah, state your observation, get really curious. Sometimes you give discovery homework to the mentee, right? Like, I would be curious what your supervisor would say about that, or I'd be curious what your colleagues would say about it. It'd be useful if you go back. So for next time, how do you feel about, going to ask your supervisor?
So you're asking them to be a seeker. I love that.
Absolutely.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And here comes the N and the E, right? Lisa, you just said, what's your observation? This is the fine art of noticing. It is the observation. It is actual specifics that you noticed. and like Tamra mentioned, I need to step away from putting our stories or our assumptions behind it. You know, you were looking out the window yesterday. That was totally disrespectful during that webinar. I noticed that you were looking out the window. Can you tell me what's been on your mind or what was behind that? So the observation is the notice, and the effect is kind of the so what, the impact, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I noticed you were looking out the window. It caused other people to be distracted as well, blah, blah, blah. But the effect is really helpful to the observation. And that's where we also say, offer your thoughts and feelings, not your assumptions, but you can say, you know, that felt really bad to me, or I reacted poorly to that, or it made me feel angry. That's where you can share your own thoughts and feelings. Because why? Because that it's a vulnerability on your part, and it starts to increase the trust. And the final C is that ode to getting really curious, like Lisa talked about. There's a whole list, a little library of what we call catalyzing questions, those curious questions for which there is no answer that you as the mentor or even you as the mentee can ask and allow the other person to explore. And the final T, there's nothing to do, but it's just a nice ending that, you know, if you follow all these tips, and there's a nice little planner in the back to plan a conversation, you know, it'll be a connecting conversation. It won't be a disconnecting conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Michelle has put the link to this model and 2 other really helpful pages, including that guide that Laura just mentioned in the chat for you all to download. So thank you so much for sharing that with everybody who's
Beautiful. We'd love to hear what you think. Use it, reach out to us, play with it. We'd love your feedback on the model.
Beautiful. And, you know, before we announce the winners of the giveaway, I'd love to hear what either what questions you have, what strikes you about this conversation. There is a lot of wisdom in this virtual room. So what's going through your mind as we talk about the topic of feedback? So Ronali says, the research suggests that women are 20% less likely to receive actionable feedback. Are you seeing similar findings in your research?
Well, what I've seen matches that, yes, in that we tend to use different words for women versus men. You know, a woman is helpful, a man delivers results. Like we tend to use more result-oriented language for men than women. So I think that's something to be aware of. And I think the more that we, again, get clear on what we're noticing and not trying to label it as much, I think that we can try to stay clear of some of that. Still, is a fine line, right?
And Tamra has spoken at a number of women's conferences on just that. And people ask us, you know, what to do. Then our answer typically is become that seeker. Women, become that seeker that you know you need to be and seek the specific information. Get really curious about some of the non-actionable feedback that you receive. Use those curious questions. And, you know, our plea to any manager is please don't write stuff down if you haven't already discussed that with this person. So wouldn't that give you the freedom to kind of change the narrative about you if you got to talk through it first before it was written down?
Yeah, we didn't talk much about being a receiver, but you know, there's a lot that we can control as a receiver of feedback, and we get a lot of bad feedback in our lives. But one of the many things we can do is start to use those catalyzing questions to say, well, you said I was helpful. Can you tell me more about that? Like, what does helpful look like to you? What kind of results did I deliver? Like, as a woman, we can start to push that mentor or a feedback provider to start to be more specific and start to articulate it in a way that maybe moves them away from these soft words.
I love that. Geraldine.
Thanks for the information. I'm finding that my brain is kind of going in 2 directions at the same time because I do administer and facilitate a mentoring program, so a peer-to-peer faculty mentoring program. But I'm also delivering a session to larger faculty soon about feedback and why learners don't use feedback and what you can do about it. So these strategies, I think, are very, I can use them in both situations. So I'm very happy for that, because instructors struggle with giving feedback, and they don't really know necessarily always how to do it. So giving them some of these tools and presenting them some of these tools, I think in that session is going to be really helpful for them.
Great.
So thanks.
Well, if there's other things we can help with, just let us know. Please link into us on LinkedIn, and Laura and I do reply. You know, we connect with people through that channel. So that's one way to get to us.
Beautiful. I want to just say a special thank you. You know, Tamra and Laura and I had the privilege, I must have been 2+ years ago,
Yeah.
a
Wow.
similar conversation, and we had so much fun. And their book is fun. You know, there are so many wonderful personal development books, but there are so few that are really engaging, that I go back to again and again, because they're practical and they're smart and they're just really, really terrific. And I know all of you who are practicing in the mentoring field or leadership development field would benefit from that. So I can't recommend it highly enough. And I can't thank you enough. You know, I sent an email saying, would you do it? And they said a yes. And yes is, oh, that enthusiastic yes really just means so very much. So thank you for sharing of your time and your wisdom and your insights. And I know you'll all benefit from learning more from Tamra and Laura through their website. Michelle, would you just share how folks can get in touch with Tamra and Laura? Wonderful. See that on the screen. We stay tuned for the date of the November Thought Leader Conference. The topic is going to be gratitude. I'm finalizing our special guest, so I'm not going to announce it and spill the beans, but stay tuned. We'll talk about the role of gratitude in mentoring, given that it's the month of Thanksgiving here in the US anyway. And again, many, many, many thanks, Tamra, Laura, and all of you for being with us today. See you soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care.